The day I buried my wife should have been the worst day of my life because I had lost the woman I loved more than anything in the universe. Instead, my family somehow found a way to make it worse. The funeral chapel was quiet except for the soft music playing through the speakers. Rain tapped gently against the windows while friends, neighbors, and a few of Zara's colleagues filled the first few rows. I stood beside her casket, trying to focus on the memories that mattered. I remembered the first time I met her 8 years earlier. Most people don't expect to meet their future spouse while arguing over a parking spot at an interstellar trade station, but that was exactly how it happened. Zara had stepped out of her shuttle, looked directly at me, and informed me that humans parked like confused livestock. I told her aliens drove like they had stolen the vehicle. She laughed. I was doomed from that moment. She was brilliant, funny, stubborn, and somehow capable of making every room feel warmer just by entering it. Even after all these years, I still couldn't walk past her favorite coffee shop without expecting her to appear beside me with a sarcastic comment ready. Unfortunately, my family never fully accepted her. They were polite when necessary, but I always knew they considered her an outsider. My younger brother, especially, treated every family gathering like a competition for attention. If someone announced an engagement, he'd announce a promotion. If someone bought a house, he'd suddenly buy a bigger one. Everything had to be about him. Still, I believed that even they wouldn't abandon me during a funeral. Then I noticed the empty seats. The entire left side of the chapel was practically deserted. No parents. No brother. No cousins. No aunts. No uncles. At first I assumed they were running late. Then my phone vibrated. A notification appeared. Normally I would have ignored it, but something made me look. That was my mistake. The first photo showed my brother wearing a ridiculous pirate captain costume. He stood beside a giant birthday cake shaped like a treasure chest. The caption read, "Best 40th birthday ever!" I stared at the screen. Another notification arrived. Then another. Then another. Within seconds, my social media feed became a horrifying slideshow. My mother was wearing an eye patch. My uncle had a fake parrot attached to his shoulder. One cousin was waving a plastic sword while standing on a patio table. Aunt Melissa appeared to be losing a duel against a 6-year-old child armed with a pool noodle. Every single member of my family was there. Every one of them. At my brother's pirate-themed birthday party. Not one had come to Zara's funeral. I continued scrolling in disbelief. One photo showed the entire family raising drinks together. Another showed them posing beside a banner that read, "Family comes first." I nearly laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was so unbelievably ridiculous that my brain didn't know how else to react. Family comes first. Apparently that slogan had an expiration date when birthdays were involved. The funeral service ended an hour later. People offered condolences before slowly leaving. Soon the room was empty. I stood alone beside Zara's casket, staring at the flowers. For a moment I felt nothing except exhaustion. Then I looked down at my phone one final time. My brother had uploaded another picture. He was pretending to steer a fake pirate ship, while my relatives cheered behind him. I slipped the phone back into my pocket. The anger wasn't explosive. It was cold. Quiet. Controlled. I looked at Zara's casket and remembered one of her favorite sayings. Eventually, everyone pays for the choices they make. At the time, I thought she was talking about life. I had no idea she had already made sure it would become a promise. And somewhere across town, my family was still partying without realizing the bill for their decision was about to arrive. A week after the funeral, I was sitting in my living room staring at a cold cup of coffee when my phone rang. The caller identified himself as my wife's attorney and requested a meeting that afternoon. I assumed it was another stack of paperwork. When someone dies, forms seem to multiply faster than rabbits. I arrived at the attorney's office expecting signatures, legal jargon, and a reminder that life was unfair. Instead, I walked into the beginning of the greatest plot twist my family had ever experienced. The attorney greeted me politely and motioned toward a chair. Before we discuss the estate, he said, your wife left specific instructions regarding this meeting. That immediately got my attention. Zara had always planned everything. She once packed emergency supplies for a weekend vacation because she claimed humans had an unhealthy relationship with bad decisions. Naturally, she had been correct. The attorney opened a file several inches thick. Your wife anticipated certain behaviors from your relatives. I actually laughed. Did she specifically predict they'd skip her funeral for a pirate-themed birthday party? The attorney adjusted his glasses. Not in those exact words. That's disappointing. But she did predict selfishness. That sounded exactly like Zara. He slid several documents across the desk. As I read them, my confusion slowly transformed into disbelief. Over the years, Zara had quietly purchased an impressive collection of properties. Luxury beach resorts, private mountain cabins, lakeside vacation homes, exclusive villas near major spaceports. Properties worth millions. I stared at the paperwork. My family had spent years enjoying those places. Every summer vacation, every holiday retreat, every family reunion. They always assumed the properties belonged to some investment company offering special discounts. In reality, Zara owned them. All of them. And she had never told anyone. The attorney wasn't finished. There's also a condition attached to the inheritance structure. I suddenly had a feeling my brother wasn't going to enjoy what came next. The attorney opened another folder. Inside was a guest attendance record from the funeral. Every name had been carefully documented. Then he showed me a clause from Zara's will. The language was simple. Any family member who chose not to attend her funeral would permanently lose access to her properties, inheritance benefits, and future distributions connected to her estate. I blinked twice. Then 3 times. She actually did this? Legally and thoroughly. The attorney looked almost impressed. Your wife was remarkably organized. That was an understatement. Zara once created a spreadsheet to determine the optimal way to load groceries into a refrigerator. The system had color codes. And apparently she'd approached her estate planning with the same enthusiasm. Then came the funniest part. The evidence. The attorney placed several printed photographs on the table. My family's social media posts. Birthday selfies. Pirate costumes. Treasure chest cake. Plastic swords. Fake parrots. Every image was time-stamped. Every image proved exactly where they had been during the funeral. For several seconds neither of us spoke. Then the attorney pointed toward a photograph of my brother standing on a table while pretending to command a pirate crew. I believe this one may become particularly useful. I couldn't stop laughing. Not because losing Zara hurt any less. Nothing would ever reduce that pain. But because I could practically hear her laughing beside me. She had known exactly who these people were. More importantly, she had protected me from them. The attorney handed me one final envelope. Inside was a letter written in her handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened it. The message was short. She wrote that she loved me. That loving me had been the greatest adventure of her life. That real family stands beside you when you need them most. And that if certain people failed that test, they deserved the consequences of their choices. By the time I finished reading, my eyes were wet. I smiled anyway. For the first time since the funeral, I felt something besides grief. Because Zara's final gift wasn't money. It wasn't property. It wasn't revenge. It was knowing that even after she was gone, she was still looking out for me. And somewhere across town, my relatives were blissfully unaware that every pirate photo they had proudly uploaded was about to become evidence against them. The first sign that disaster had arrived was when my brother called me 17 times in a single afternoon. I ignored every call. The 18th call came from my mother. The 19th came from my father. The 20th came from an aunt who hadn't spoken to me in nearly 2 years. Apparently everyone suddenly remembered I existed. I let voicemail handle the situation. The messages were spectacular. Some were angry. Some were confused. One sounded like a hostage negotiation. My favorite was my brother's. "You can't do this to family." That was an interesting argument coming from a man who had skipped my wife's funeral to dress like a discount pirate. Over the following days, legal notices arrived throughout the family. The reactions were immediate. Vacation reservations were cancelled. Property access cards were deactivated. Future inheritance distributions vanished. Years of privileges disappeared almost overnight. The family responded exactly as you'd expect. They panicked. Soon they were challenging Zara's will in court. I attended every hearing quietly. There was no need for dramatic speeches. The facts were doing all the work. My brother sat with his attorney looking deeply offended by reality. At one point he actually stood and declared, "It was my 40th birthday!" The courtroom became very quiet. Then Zara's attorney calmly replied, "Funerals are generally more difficult to reschedule." Several people struggled not to laugh. Even the judge looked like he needed a moment. The excuses only became worse from there. One aunt claimed she intended to attend both events but got distracted. As if she'd accidentally wandered into a pirate party and couldn't find the exit. An uncle blamed navigation software. A cousin insisted he misunderstood the date despite posting photos online with timestamps matching the funeral service. Every explanation somehow sounded more ridiculous than the last. Then came the evidence presentation. I almost felt bad for them. Almost. A large screen displayed social media photographs one after another. There was my brother posing beside a treasure chest cake. There was my mother wearing a pirate hat. There was my uncle pretending to duel a decorative octopus with a plastic sword. There was an entire group photo beneath a banner that read, "Family comes first." The irony hit the courtroom like a meteor. Even the judge stared at that picture for several seconds. Then he slowly removed his glasses. "Family comes first?" he asked. Nobody answered. What exactly could they say? The evidence continued. Videos appeared. Photos appeared. Comments appeared. Every post confirmed exactly where they had chosen to spend that day. At one point my brother's attorney looked physically exhausted. I couldn't blame him. Defending those photographs was like defending a robbery where the thief had posted selfies during the crime. The final ruling arrived several weeks later. The court upheld every provision of Zara's will. Every single one. The properties remained protected. The inheritance conditions remained valid. The consequences remained permanent. My family's expressions were unforgettable. My brother looked like someone had cancelled Christmas. My mother appeared ready to faint. One uncle stared into space as though reconsidering every decision he'd ever made. The funniest part came afterward. Court records became public. That meant the pirate photographs became official exhibits. Permanent legal documents. Stored forever. Future generations could theoretically discover that a grown man lost access to millions in benefits because he attended a pirate-themed birthday party instead of a funeral. As everyone filed out of the courtroom, my brother stopped beside me. For a moment I thought he might apologize. Instead he said, "You're really going through with this?" I looked at him calmly. "I didn't do anything." He frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means Zara made her choice." Then I walked away. For months my family had treated her like she didn't matter. Now her final decision mattered more than anything they wanted. And there wasn't a single thing they could do about it. The months following the court case were surprisingly peaceful. Not because my family suddenly became reasonable. That would have required a miracle. No, they became peaceful because they were too busy dealing with the consequences of their own decisions. For years they had treated Zara's vacation properties like personal playgrounds. Every summer there was a beach trip. Every winter there was a mountain retreat. Family reunions were held at lakeside cabins. Nobody ever bothered asking how those places remained available year after year. Now they knew. And now they had lost them. The first apology arrived 3 weeks after the court ruling. Then another. Then 6 more. Soon my mailbox looked like a greeting card store had exploded. My brother sent a handwritten letter claiming the family should move forward together. That was particularly amusing considering he hadn't wanted to stand beside me during the worst day of my life. My mother called repeatedly. My father left messages suggesting everyone had simply made a mistake. A mistake was forgetting someone's birthday. Skipping a funeral to attend a pirate party required planning. I chose not to respond. Instead, I focused on rebuilding my life. Several of Zara's properties were converted into profitable businesses. Others became rental retreats that funded charitable programs she had always wanted to support. Every decision felt like honoring her memory. One afternoon, nearly a year after her funeral, I received a call from her attorney. "There is one final item," he said. I drove to his office the next day. Waiting for me was a sealed envelope. The last letter Zara had written. For several minutes I simply stared at it. Then I opened it. Her words immediately felt familiar. Warm. Confident. Comforting. She wrote that if I was reading the letter, it meant I had survived the hardest part. She reminded me that grief wasn't something you defeated. It was something you carried while continuing to live. She thanked me for every adventure we shared. For every ridiculous argument. For every late-night conversation. For loving her when many people never truly accepted her. Then she wrote something that made me smile through tears. "Never waste your life chasing revenge. Consequences are more effective and require less effort." That sounded exactly like her. The woman could turn wisdom into sarcasm better than anyone I had ever known. Later that evening, I visited our favorite lakeside property. The sun was setting across the water. Orange light reflected against the calm surface while a gentle breeze moved through the trees. We had spent countless weekends there together. I could almost hear her laughter. Almost hear one of her jokes about humans and their inability to follow simple instructions. For the first time in a long while, the memories didn't hurt quite as much. They felt comforting. Like she was still somehow part of the world around me. A few months later, the final piece of comedy arrived. My attorney forwarded an email. The sender was my brother. Apparently he was planning another birthday celebration and wanted to rent one of the lakeside properties. I nearly choked on my coffee. After everything that had happened, he still thought that was a good idea. The reservation request had already been automatically denied. The reason listed in the system made me laugh harder than I had laughed in months. Access permanently revoked due to documented pirate-related misconduct. I read it 3 times. Then a 4th. Somewhere, I was absolutely certain Zara would have loved that. As the sun disappeared below the horizon, I sat on the dock and looked across the lake. I missed her every day. I probably always would. But she had left me something more valuable than money, property, or legal victories. She had left me proof that love endures. Proof that loyalty matters. And proof that sometimes the universe has an incredible sense of humor. Especially when pirates are involved.